Hello everyone, today we will see the lesson Iswaran the Storyteller. Here, the title of this chapter, Iswaran the Storyteller, tells us that this story is about Iswaran and he is called the Storyteller because as storytelling is an art and he is good at it, and Iswaran uses special effects, does means voice modulation, uses his body language to make the story realistic, so that the listener, that is Mahendra, gets attracted and captivated in his story. And the writer wants to highlight this quality of Iswaran, that he was so good at telling stories that they appear to be real, and his stories were a source of entertainment for Mahindra. Okay, so let's start the explanation parawise. So let's start the story. The story was narrated to Ganesh by a young man, Mahindra, by name. He was a junior supervisor in a firm which offered on hire supervisor at various types of construction sites, factories, bridges, dams, and so on. Mahendra's job was to keep an eye on the activities at the work site, and he had to keep moving from place to place every now and then as ordered by his head office, from a coal mining area to the railway bridge construction site. From there, after a few months, to a chemical plant which was coming up somewhere. So here, supervisor means a person whose job is to check the work of all the other people, and Mahendra narrated a story about his cook Iswaran to Ganesh, and Mahindra worked as a junior supervisor in a company which provided junior supervisors to various construction companies on rent, and he got posted at different sites like factories, bridges, dams which were under construction. And Mahindra's work was to keep an eye um, on all the workers at the site, and he had to change places often and worked at various places like a coal mine, railway bridge construction site, and the construction site of a chemical plant. Okay, he was a bachelor, his needs were simple, and he was able to adjust himself to all kinds of odd conditions, whether it was an ill equipped circuit house or a makeshift canvas tent in a middle of a stone quarry. But one asset he had was his cook, Iswaran. The cook was quite attached to Mahendra and followed him uncomplainingly wherever he was posted. He cooked for Mahendra, washed his clothes, and chatted away with his master at night. He could weave out endless stories and anecdotes on varied subjects. So here, bachelor means a person who is unmarried, makeshift means temporary, query is a mine, asset means advantage, anecdote is the short story, amusing or making interesting story about a real incident or person. So, as Mahendra was unmarried and he did not have a family, he was able to live in these temporary quarters providing at the construction sites, and he adjusted well in the circuit houses which did not provide the basic amenities, or even the tents which were temporarily in nature. And Mahendra had an advantage. He was accompanied by his cook Iswaran, and Iswaran was very close to Mahendra and accompanied him everywhere, and he did not complain about the tough conditions in which he had to live. He cooked food for him, washed his clothes, and gave him company by talking to him at night. Iswaran had a quality that he was good at telling stories, and he entertained Mahendra with his stories, which were based on different subjects. Iswaran also had an amazing capacity to produce vegetables and cooking ingredients seemingly out of nowhere in the middle of a desolate landscape with no shops visible for miles around, and he would miraculously conjure up the most delicious dishes made with fresh vegetables within an hour of arriving at the zinc sheet shelter at the new workplace. So, desolate means inhabitant, empty or empty. Conjure up means to gather or create with magic. Zinc sheet shelter is a temporary place to live with a roof made of metallic sheets. So here Mahindra tells that Iswaran was a great cook whenever they shifted to a new location. So he would gather all the vegetables and other ingredients required by him to cook in no time. And as they lived at places which was not inhabited by many people in temporary shelters with roof made of metallic sheets, and it seemed as if he would do some magic and gather all the ingredients out of nowhere. So Mahindra would be up early in the morning and leave for work after breakfast, carrying some prepared food with him. Meanwhile, Iswaran would tidy up the shed, wash the clothes, and have a leisurely bath, pouring several buckets of water over his head, muttering a prayer all the while, and it would be a lunchtime by then. After eating, he would read for a while before dozing off, and the book was usually some popular Tamil thriller running to hundreds of pages, and its imaginative descriptions and narrative flourishes would hold Iswaran in thought. Muttering means speaking in a low voice. Dozing off is falling asleep. Narrative flourishes is detailed descriptions about something. Enthrall is the state of being in someone's path. So here Mahendra would wake up early in the morning, get ready and leave for work after eating his breakfast, and he would carry his lunch along with him. After he left, Iswaran would clean their living place, wash Mahendra's clothes and leave and have a nice bath, and he would take many buckets of water and pour water on his head and while mumbling a prayer. After that, he would eat his lunch and read his favorite book in Tamil language, and Iswaran would get carried away with the details and descriptions given in the books that he read. Then he would go off to sleep. His own descriptions were greatly influenced by the Tamil authors that he read. When he was narrating even the smallest of incidents, he would try to work in suspense and a surprise ending into the account. For example, instead of saying that he had come across an uprooted tree on the highway, he would say, with eyebrows suitably arched and hands held out in a dramatic gestures, and the road was deserted and I was all alone. Suddenly I spotted something that looked like an enormous bushy beast lying sprawled across the road, and I was half inclined to turn and go back, but as I came closer, I saw that it was a fallen tree, and with its dry branches spread out, Mahendra would stretch himself back in his canvas chair and listen to Iswaran's tales uncritically. So here curved, arched means curved, and gestures a movement of hands for head to indicate something. Deserted means empty, and enormous means huge. So, as Iswaran reads stories with detailed descriptions, he narrated them in the same way. Mahendra recollects that he would narrate even a small incident with a lot of suspense and surprise, which made it very interesting for the listener. Then he gives an example that instead of saying that he was walking down the highway and he came across a tree which had broken and had fallen on the road, Iswaran would use his facial expressions and bodily gestures to narrate it. And he would say that the road was empty and was all alone. This would create suspense in the listener's mind, and then he would say that all of a sudden he saw a huge beast was lying across the road, and as he walked ahead, his mind was telling him to turn and go back. As he reached closer, he saw that it was a tree that had fallen and was lying on the road. The branches of the tree had spread out and seemed as it was a huge beast. Mahendra says that this talent of Iswaran made this simple story very interesting and it captivated him. Although he knew that some of the stories were not true, but the way in which Iswaran narrated them was so interesting that Mahendra would not say anything and listen him quietly. So interesting, na? So let's move to the next paragraph. The place I come from is famous for timber. Iswaran would begin. There is a richly wooded forest all around. The logs are hauled on to the lorries by elephants. They are huge, well fed beasts. When they turn wild, even the most experienced mouth is not able to control them. After this prologue, Iswaran would launch into an elaborate anecdote involving an elephant. Here, timber is the wood that has been processed for commercial purposes. Hold is transported. Prologue is an introductory speech. Elaborate is detailed. So Mahendra recollects another story told by Iswaran. Iswaran said that his native village was surrounded by a huge forest which was full of trees. The huge logs of timber were sold for commercial purposes and they were transported onto the vehicles by elephants. And they were huge elephants and if they became mad, they would get out of control and the mouth would not be able to tame them, not able to control them. And this introductory session was followed by a detailed story involving an elephant. So Mahendra recollects another story, and that Iswaran said that this native village was surrounded by a huge forest and was full of trees. The huge logs of timber were sold for commercial purposes and they were transported onto the village vehicles by elephants. So they were huge elephants, as if they became mad and they would get out of the control and the mouth would not be able to control them. And let's move to another passage, another paragraph. Okay. One day a tusker escaped from the timber yard and began to roam about, stamping on bushes, tearing up wild creepers, and breaking branches at will. You know, sir, how an elephant behaves when it goes mad? Iswaran would get so caught up in the excitement of his own story that he would get up from the floor and jump about, stamping his feet in emulation of the mad elephant. So here tusker is an elephant. Roam about means move around. Stamping is hitting with force. Emulation is effort to match or surpass a person by limitations or copying. So here the story was narrated as follows, that one day an elephant escaped from the timber yard and roamed around the forest, and it stepped on the bushes and crushed them, tore the creepers, plants, and broke branches of trees which came in its way. And Iswaran asked Mahendra whether he knew how a mad elephant behaved. So, in order to make his story more effective, Iswaran stood up and jumped around the place and hitting his foot on the ground in order to copy the action of the mad elephant. So interesting. So, let's move to next para. The elephant reached the outskirts of our town, breaking the fences down. Just 1 minute. Breaking the fences down like matchsticks, he would continue. It came into the main road and smashed all the stalls selling fruits, mud pots, and cloths. People ran helter and skelter in panic. The elephant now entered a school ground where children were playing, breaking through the brick wall. All the boys ran into the classrooms and shut the doors tight. The beast grunted and wondered about pulling out the football goalpost, tearing down the volleyball net, kicking and flattening the drum kept for water, and uprooting the shrubs. Meanwhile, all the teachers had climbed up to the terrace of the school building. From there, they helplessly watched the depredations of the elephant, and there was not a soul below on the ground, and the streets were empty, and if the inhabitants of the entire town had suddenly disappeared. So, outskirts means outer area, helter skelter means here and there, panic is sudden fear causing unthinkable behavior, grunted means making a loud sound, and predations means attack which are made to destroy something. So here, as the elephant reached the outer boundary of their town, it broke the fences. The fences seemed as if they were like matchsticks for the huge elephant, and the elephant reached the main road and broke all the stalls selling different things like fruits, mud pots, and clothes, and the people were taken unaware, and so they ran here and there. Then it broke the wall of a school and entered the ground where the students were playing. All the students ran back into their classrooms and closed the doors, and the elephant made loud noises and roamed around in the school ground, and it broke the goalpost in the football ground, tore the net that had been put up in the volleyball court, and stepped on the water drum and broke it and tore many plants as well. The teachers had climbed onto the roof of the school building and watched helplessly as the elephant destroyed the school property, and there was not even a single person to be seen around, and all the streets of the town were empty as all the people were scared of the mad elephant. I was studying in a junior class at that time and was watching the whole drama from the rooftop. I don't know what came over me. Suddenly, I grabbed a cane from the hands of one of the teachers and ran down the stairs and into the open. The elephant grunted and menacingly swung a branch of a tree which it held in its trunk. It stamped its feet, kicking up a lot of mud and dust. It looked frightening, but I moved slowly towards it, stick in hand. People were watching the scene, hypnotized from nearby housetops. The elephant looked at me, red eyed, ready to rush towards me. It lifted its trunk and trumpeted loudly. At that moment, I moved forward and, mustering all my force, whacked its third toenail on the quick. The beast looked stunned for a moment, and then it shivered from head to foot and collapsed. So, here, hypnotized means to influence or control or direct completely as a personal charm, like domination. Mastering means putting together, whacked means hit noisily, collapsed means fell. See, at that time of the incident, Iswaran was studying in one of the junior classes in the school, and he was watching the elephant from the rooftops. And suddenly he took the stick from one of the teacher and ran downstairs towards the school ground. And the elephant made a loud noise when he saw a small boy approaching it. And it lifted a branch of a tree in its trunk, hit its foot on the ground, which threw a lot of mud and dust in the air, and the elephant was threatening Iswaran, but the boy was not afraid of it. With the stick in his hand, he moved towards the elephant slowly. Many people had climbed onto the rooftop of their houses and were watching the incident, and they were standing still and were awestruck, waiting to see what happened next. Iswaran saw that the elephant had red colored eyes, and which were full of anger, and it again lifted its trunk and made a loud trumpet sound as it was about to attack Iswaran. And just then Iswaran gathered all his force and hit the elephant's third toenail quickly. The elephant was stunned at what had happened. Then it reacted by shivering all over, fainted, and fell on the ground unconscious. So let's move to next paragraph. At this point, Iswaran would leave the story unfinished and get up mumbling, "I will be back," after lighting the gas and warming up the dinner. Mahendra, who had been listening with rapt attention, would be left hanging. When he returned, Iswaran would not pick up the thread of the story right away. Mahendra would have to remind him that the conclusion was pending. Well, a veterinary doctor was summoned to revive the animal. Iswaran would shrug casually, and 2 days later it was led away by its mouth to the jungle. So, rapt attention means completely fascinated or absorbed by what one is seeing or hearing. Pick up the threads of the story means would not restart the story from where he left in order to arouse curiosity. And veterinary doctor, a doctor who specializes in treating animals. Summoned means called. And shrug means to raise one's shoulders slightly and momentarily to express doubt or ignorance or indifference, something like that. So after this, Iswaran would leave the story incomplete, and in a low voice he would say that he would return after lighting the gas stove to warm the dinner, as they were getting late for the meal. And Mahendra would be curious to know what happened next and would feel disappointed that Iswaran had left the story unfinished. And on returning, he would not continue with the story as he wanted to arouse curiosity in Mahendra. And Mahendra, who would be eager to know the ending, would ask Iswaran to conclude the story. Iswaran would just say casually that a veterinary doctor was called to bring the elephant back to consciousness, and after 2 days, the mouth would take the elephant back to the jungle. Well, a veterinary doctor was summoned to revive the animal. Iswaran would shrug casually. Sorry. Well, how did you manage to do it, Iswaran? How did you bring down the beast? So Mahendra was curious to know that how did the young Iswaran manage to overpower the huge elephant? It has something to do with a Japanese art, I think, sir, karate or jujitsu it is called. I had read about it somewhere. It temporarily paralyzed the nervous system, you see. So here Iswaran said that he performed a Japanese martial art, and he said it was either karate or jujitsu. He had read about it somewhere that the martial art rendered a person unconscious by uprooting or by disrupting the nervous system. Not a day passed without Iswaran recounting some story packed with adventure, horror, and suspense. Whether the story was credible or not, Mahendra enjoyed listening to it because of the inimitable way in which it was told. Iswaran seemed to more than make up for the absence of a TV in Mahendra's living quarters. So here, credible means able to believe, convincing. Um, Inimitable is unique. Every day, Iswaran would narrate one or the other story full of adventure, horror, or thrill. Sometimes Mahendra felt that the story was a fiction, but still, he enjoyed listening to it because of the unique way in which it was narrated by Iswaran, as there was no television set at the place where they lived, and these stories were a source of entertainment for Mahendra. So, one morning when Mahendra was having breakfast, Iswaran asked, "Can I make something special for dinner tonight, sir? After all, today is an auspicious day. According to tradition, we prepare various delicacies to feed the spirits of our ancestors today, sir." Auspicious means good, delicacies is tasty food, spirits is souls of the dead, ancestors means elders of the family. So here, one morning Mahendra was having his breakfast. Iswaran asked him if he could prepare a special meal For dinner, as it was a good day, he added that on that day they prepared special food for the souls of the dead elders of the family. That night, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and complimented Iswaran on these culinary skills, and he seemed very pleased but unexpectedly launched into a most garish account involving the supernatural. Culinary skills means related to cooking, and garish is something which is too colorful and fancy, and it is disliked. Supernatural means related to ghosts and spirits. So Iswaran had preparing a delicious dinner, and Mahendra praised his cooking skills, and Iswaran was happy on being praised. By all of a sudden started narrating a detailed story related to ghost and supernatural powers, which was disliked by Mahendra. Sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground, and he started. Mahendra was jerked out of a pleasant reverie. He had drifted into what the satisfying meal. I knew on the first day itself when I saw a human skull lying on the path. Even now I come across a number of skulls and bones, Iswaran continued. So reverie is the state of being pleasantly lost in one's thought, means, or we can say, a daydream. Iswaran said to Mahendra that the site of the factory was earlier a place where the dead was buried. It's a burial place. Or Mahendra jerked out of the pleasant thought after the tasty meal. Iswaran continued that on the first day itself he had seen a human skull lying on the ground, and which when he was returning after buying vegetables, even later he had come across a number of skulls and bones lying on the around the place. He went on to narrate how he sometimes saw ghosts at times. I am not easily frightened by these things, sir. I am a brave fellow, but one horrible ghost of a woman which appears off and on at midnight during the full moon. It is an ugly creature which with matted hair and a shriveled face, like a skeleton holding a fortress in his arms. So shriveled means wrinkled, and shrunken fetus means unborn baby. So Iswaran added that sometime he saw ghosts at night, although he was not scared of them as he was a brave person. But once, and he saw a very horrible ghost of a woman. It appeared on a full moon night at 12 o'clock, and it was very ugly, had matted hair, and had a shrunken, withered face. It looked like a skeleton holding an unborn baby in its arms. So Mahendra shivered at a description and interrupted rather sharply. You are crazy, Iswaran. There are no such things as ghosts or spirits. It is all a figment of your imagination. Get your digestive system examined, and maybe your head as well. You are talking nonsense. So figment is production. Mahendra disliked the story and interrupted sharply, and he scolded Iswaran and said that he had gone mad. Iswaran said that ghosts did not exist, and he added that it was Iswaran's imagination, and he ordered Iswaran to get himself checked up, to get his digestive system and his brain examined, as he was speaking nonsense. And Mahendra asked him to get his digestive system checked up, because when a person is suffering from constipation, and he gets nightmares and dreams of ghosts and supernatural powers. So he left the room and retired for the night, expecting Iswaran to sulk for a couple of days, but the next morning he was surprised to find the cook as cheerful and talkative as ever. Sulk means be silent, morose, or bad-tempered out of annoyance or disappointment. Mahendra had thought that Iswaran would remain quiet for a few days, as he had scolded him the previous night, and he was astonished to see the cheerful and talkative Iswaran the next morning again. He left the room and retired Oh, sorry. From that day on, Mahendra, for all his brave talk, went to bed with a certain unease. Every night he peered into the darkness outside through the window next to his bed, trying to make sure that there was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity. But he could only see a sea of darkness with the twinkling lights of the factory miles away. Vicinity means nearby area. So Mahindra showed that he was very brave, but on the contrary, he was uneasy because of the story Iswaran had narrated. And every night before going to bed, he peeped out of the window next to his bed to assure himself that there was no ghost around, and he did not see any ghost but only saw darkness and the twinkling lights of the factory. He had always liked to admire the milk white landscape on the full moon nights, but after hearing Sviren's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window altogether when the moon was full. Before listening to insurance story, Mahindra means light watching the white colored landscape on a full moon night, as Iswaran had told me that on a full moon night a female ghost haunted place. He stopped looking out at that night and he was afraid bumping into the ugly ghost. So one night Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by a low moan close to his window. At first he put it down to a cat prowling around for mice, but the sound was too guttural for the cat, and he resisted the curiosity to look out lest he should behold a sight which would stop his heart, but the wailing became louder and less feline. He could not resist the temptation any more. Lowering himself to the level of the window sill, he looked out at the white sheet of the moonlight outside. There is not too far away was a dark cloudy form clutching a bundle. Mahendra broke into a cold sweat and fell back on his pillow, panting, and he gradually recovered from the ghastly experience. He began to reason with himself and finally concluded that it must have been some sort of auto suggestion, some trick that his subconscious had played on him. So, moan means crying sound, and prowling means searching. Guttural is sound produced in the throat, or we can say harsh sounding. Wailing means crying sound. Feline is related to cats or other members of the cat family. Panting means breathing heavily. Ghastly means causing horror and fear. Autosuggestion is something subconscious adoption of an idea which one has originated oneself. So here one night as Mahendra was asleep and he was awakened by the sound of someone crying, and he thought that it could be a cat looking for mice and tried to go back to sleep. The sound became more harsh and seemed to be a human sound. And then Mahendra wanted to peep out of the window but stopped himself as he was afraid that if he saw a ghost he could even die. And the crying sound became louder and it did not appear to be the sound of a cat. Mahendra could not stop himself, and so he bent down and lifted his head slightly in order to peep out. In the white colored moonlight, Mahendra saw the ghost, and it was holding a bundle in one hand. And Mahendra panicked, and he was breathing heavily and fell back on the bed. After some time, he recovered from the scary experience and thought that probably his subconscious mind was showing him the ghost as he had been thinking of it. He assured himself that actually there was no ghost and his mind was playing a trick on him. So by the time he had got up in the morning, had a bath, and come out to have his breakfast, the horror of the previous night had faded from his memory. Iswaran greeted him at the door with his lunch packet and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Iswaran grinned and said, "Sir, remember the other day when I was telling you about the female ghost with a purchase in its arm? You were so angry with me for imagining things. Well, you saw her yourself last night. I came running, hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room. So horrible. So here, grinned means smile broadly, resolving means deciding, haunted place means visited by ghost. So by the time Mahindra woke up, took his bath, and came out of the breakfast, and he had forgotten the ghostly experience of the previous night. And Iswaran greeted him, gave him his lunch and his bag. And as Mahindra was about to leave, Iswaran smiled and said that the other day Mahindra had scolded him for discussing the ugly ghost, but last night Mahindra himself saw it. Iswaran had heard Mahindra's cries the previous night. A chill went down Mahindra's spine. So he did not wait for Iswaran to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. So spine is the backbone, everyone knows that. Resolving means deciding, and handed his paper means resigned. Iswaran's comment scared Mahindra once again. He did not hear him further and hurried off to his office, and he decided to resign from the job and leave the haunted place, and could not live there any longer. So this is the story, or interesting story, we can say that. I hope may this explanation be helpful for you guys, and the lesson is over. And thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe my channel. Bye.